all I was paying attention to was the subject in front of me, usually a bird, and it was just all about photograph that bird, photograph that bird.
And the goal was to shoot it so that the head, the eye, the bill are all sharp, which this one is, and then I just wanted it to melt away after that. Hey, and welcome everyone. This is going to be tonight's edition. We're talking about raptors. I am Scott Keys. I'll be your host tonight. I'm flying solo. Ray is on sabbatical. He will be back hopefully in a month or two. He's taking a little bit of time off from some of his photography, and I will miss him tonight. It's my first time doing it alone. I'm running the live stream by myself, and I'm going to be doing the commentation, of course. So tonight's topic is raptors, and I wanted to go over a couple things that I do a lot of photography with raptors. I break my birds down into 4 groups. As most of you know, 99% of what I do for wildlife is revolved around birds. So I do all subjects and all different times a year. I break the categories down into 4. So I have songbirds, we look at shorebirds, waterfowl, and then raptors. And I will tell you that of those 4 categories, I find raptors to be the most challenging of all. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, just getting subjects can be very, very difficult. They're not as approachable as some of the other, let's say like waterfowl. If you're in a blind, they're pretty approachable. Songbirds, pretty approachable. And to give you an idea of how difficult it can be, the last couple months, in fall during migration, I really focus on raptors, and I posted 17 images over the last 2 months. And to get those 17 images that I publicly shared, I went up to the local hawk watches. I live near a ridge. I'm very lucky that I'm about 30 minutes away from a hot spot, and about 2 or 3 times a week for 4 or 5 hours, that's where I would be. And when you think about the investment of time to post 17 images, you're probably looking at 50 to 100 hours worth of time. And that's a sizable investment for somebody who works a full-time job. So one of the things I just want to talk about is, how you can maximize your time with raptors, and then also what to look for to improve your photography. To put it in perspective, those 17 photos that I posted, I looked back through my archives. For shorebirds, there was a day where I went out in the evening for 2 hours, woke up the next morning for another hour and a half, 3.5 hours. I publicly posted 17 images from those 3.5 hours. So shorebirds, a lot easier, songbirds, a lot easier, waterfowl, a little bit more difficult, but I still think that photographing raptors is the most challenging. And the way I did this for tonight is I broke it down into types of photography for these birds of prey. So we're going to look at perched birds, birds in flight. We're going to talk about the backgrounds, how to achieve better perspective. And with all photography, I have 3 basic rules. And the basic premises for everything that I do is light, perspective, and environment. And now those are just the fundamentals. This isn't talking about getting creative or wide angle photography. This is just fundamentals: light, perspective, and environment. And I'll try to apply those 3 concepts to raptors. Now, the one I want to talk about first is light. And in all of my photography, I try to apply the subject and the light together. So if I'm shooting shorebirds, I have a certain type of lighting that I would find ideal. For songbirds, that lighting might be a little bit different. The one thing about raptors that becomes so challenging is they aren't as active primarily at dawn during that first couple hours of golden hour. So especially during a migration period, the birds tend to get a little bit more active in the day. That means you're going to be fighting with either overcast skies or with direct sunlight. I'm a little bit more forgiving with light. So there's going to be a lot of times for birds in flight that direct light is probably going to be suitable, and it is going to have some advantages. And we'll talk about that when we get to birds in flight. So the first thing I'm going to go through is just some concepts around perched birds. So here is and in the chat box, I would like a identification. So I'll test the raptor nerds out here, and we'll see if anybody can actually get what this bird is as I'm talking about it. What you're seeing on the screen now is pretty typical of a perched raptor. This is on a man-made object with a solid blue sky. This is actually an image I posted. However, it's probably not an image I would ever post, except for this species. This is a lot of times what you see with raptor photography is a bird on a pole, overhead, blue sky. I would say this is probably the least ideal scenario possible. So what I will show you, thanks Mark. Mark chimes in with hawk. That's a great call. It is actually, yes, it is a hawk, but it is more specifically a falcon. And this is probably the most badass bird that ever lived. There might be some people that argue golden eagle or something, but this is a gyrfalcon, and this is a super rare visitor to the northern part of the United States. I was lucky enough to get him last year. I used it as an example kind of what not to do with perched birds, and I'm going to flip through a couple more and show you what might be a little bit ideal. Josh, no, there's no way that a great skua is the most or the coolest bird out there. So this is a little bit more ideal. Here you have a natural perch in pretty good light. This was shot at the end of the day. When you're looking at raptors, if you want perched or like these nice shots, think about later in the evening. They will be a little bit more active in evening and in morning. That's my experience. I've never done any, I'm not a scientist. I've never done any research on this. I read a lot of books and stuff, but I will tell you that my experience tells me that if I'm photographing raptors, I prefer to do it in the afternoon. Found this guy perched low, and what I really liked about this is the mountain in the background. So you actually break up that solid blue sky, and he's much lower. So finding areas where you can achieve shots like this is a very densely populated redtail area. I've seen up to 15, 20 birds in 1 square mile. So when you have areas like that, it gives you more opportunity. This is a peregrine falcon. Also, again, when we talk about perspective, notice that I'm shooting fairly eye level. He might be a couple inches above my eyes, but just the eye contact is dead on. Really nice image, really clean perch. Not a lot going on in the background. So a nice image because it's isolated, but not a real whole lot going on in the background. I flipped around to the other side, and now you can see a little bit of a difference because I have a dune in the background with some sky. Knowing the habitat, so knowing that these peregrines do like the beach, they typically hunt waterfowl, so they'll go out on the oceans and hunt. And this is an ideal spot because there is no growth for them to perch on. They're gonna perch, but the only thing on this beach is driftwood. So when you have them, this is where they perch. They perch low. So kind of knowing the environment and the habitat can create these. This is another peregrine falcon in a different situation. I'm shooting a little bit above it from one of the most popular locations for peregrine falcons in the country. This is in New York, and not a location that I shoot often because I don't like, I like my wildlife photography to feel like wildlife. And we're going to talk about eagles a little bit later, but this location and Conowingo in Maryland are two locations that are super, super popular, and it just doesn't feel like wildlife photography sometimes when you park your car, walk 15 feet, set up a tripod, shoot a bunch of pictures, and go home. So, but again, perspective-wise, I know what you can achieve here. You can get looks that are eye level, or even in this case, on top of it. I did want to show the back of the bird because we'll talk about the difference between top and bottom, but typically raptors look better on the top sides, and it's a view that I really like. And then a couple more perched birds. This one just takes advantage of some golden light. You can see the color in the background. Really nice stuff there. Another perched bird. Another perched bird. These red tails, one of the reasons I like to shoot red tails is they're extremely variable. There's actually subspecies that come through this part of the mid-Atlantic that you can focus on in winter, but just the difference in coloration from this bird, and if you flip back one more, you can already see the difference. These are 3 different birds. You can see the difference in these 3 in their plumage. I just find that amazing. And then here's a northern harrier that I shot out in Utah. Loved the lighting in this and the perch. I like the busy background because it's out of focus and it adds a pattern that I really find great. And then a little kestrel. A couple techniques on these drive-bys. So I want to throw out, as I go through these images, I do want to offer some suggestions on how to achieve this without the birds flying. So when you're dealing with perch birds, there's this concept called bumping. It's not something it's a little bit frowned upon. It's not something that I would encourage you to do, but bumping basically just means you keep pushing the same bird over and over to new perches. If that bird has flown once from you, it's going to continue to fly away from you. At some point, you have to give up. And I don't know that there's a rule for this. Some people are going to tell you if you flush it once, you've flushed it one too many times. Typically, I would say most people find it acceptable if you're trying to photograph a raptor and it moves, that you are done. So you basically get your one chance on that perch. If it bumps to it or flies to a different perch, it's probably time to just leave it alone, because again, it's aware of you and it's going to continue to fly. One thing about all of these, and these two birds, this one taken in the same area as this one, a lot of times on these perch setups, if I see them in perch locations, I will try not to stop my car. And here's where having a partner can be helpful. Mark, who's actually on the call, has done this with me. You just kind of, you take one for the team and you let your partner get the shot out of the window, but you don't stop the car. So I would say, I can remember a couple of times where I've had Mark out there in this same field and I'd say, all right, Mark, are you ready? And he would, the attempt was to shoot the bird while the car was moving. In certain locations, birds are going to be used to cars. So in this field, there's cars all over. And they're used to cars driving. They're not used to cars stopping. So if the car stops, the bird's going to fly. So one technique you can do is, if you have a partner, you can try to do these slow drive-bys. I will tell you, I've done drive-bys solo. I don't necessarily advise it. You have to be very, very careful. If you get in an accident and you explain to the officer that you were trying to photograph a bird, I don't think that's going to go over too well with the officer or your insurance company. So, but it is something to keep in mind. The other thing for perched birds, if you know the bird, so in other words, if there's a bird that's often in the same area, they have favorite perches. They will come back to the same perches over and over. It's an example of American kestrel. I know that he hangs around in this area. This was actually on a drive-by. But if you know the areas where they're at, then you can anticipate that perch and set up early. This is a common practice with things like kingfishers, not a raptor, but a bird that has favorite perches. And the theory is you find a blind, you create a blind, or you use your car as a blind. And for raptors, normally that's what you would do. Wait on the favorite perch, hope for great light, and then you can get some engaging pictures. The one up on the screen now is a merlin. I really like this. It's actually a telephone pole, but because it's so weathered and worn, it has the appearance that it could be a natural perch or a tree stump. One of the things I will talk about on a couple more after this, including this one, is the fact that a lot of times you're going to get these guys overhead. And when we talk about perspective, we always want to be at eye level. Ideally, there are some exceptions for creative photography, but for portraits like this, being at eye level. This northern harrier was on roadkill, and somebody had pushed the roadkill off the road, which was ideal. I would encourage you guys, if you see something on the side of the road and you're worried about raptors, get it off the road, because they will feed on that. And I read an article one time about how many northern harriers each year get killed by cars feeding on roadkill. We were lucky on this one because we saw it on the roadkill and we were able to park behind a big concrete barrier and use the barrier as a blind. The bird was really, really, really close. I'll show you a headshot of the same bird. I was probably about 30 feet away for this with a little bit of crop, but I have the same bird in a minute coming up much closer. This is a rough-legged hawk, and again, the great eye contact. Going with these tighter headshots works when you can get this close. And these are shot out of my sunroof. You can see that the bird is aware of me because he's looking right at me, but he didn't bump. And again, if I would have bumped him once, this would have been it, but I slowed the car down. He allowed me to get some shots. I got a little closer. He allowed me to get some shots. I got this shot. I knew I wasn't going to get anything else, so I just stayed there, waited to see if he would eventually fly, which he didn't. He just stayed there, so I moved on. The one thing about this is, even though it's overhead, so he's probably 20 or 30 feet over my head, you can see that it doesn't feel like a belly shot because I've cropped it down to just the head. So that's something you can do if you're able to get that close and you can get that great eye contact. The picture really becomes about the eyes and the engagement rather than the whole bird and trying to get the total body. I have a couple of these examples. This is a red tail kind of giving me a pretty cool look. Same thought, I'm underneath him shooting out my sunroof. And then this was the northern harrier that allowed me to get exceptionally close. So this was a real tight headshot. I actually put the aperture down to about f8 or maybe even f11 because I knew there wasn't going to be a lot of depth of field that close. So you could see I got the bill, the eyes, everything is sharp on this one. There's great feather detail around his head. So this was a shot that I actually really liked. And then every now and then you get lucky and you see something like this. This is a red tail that I was able to photograph on hunt. I was lucky enough that we saw and anticipated where he was going to hunt. It's actually a very predictable bird. It's my favorite hawk because I know his perches, I know the field he hunts in, and I can actually set up there sometimes and just wait for him to do something cool. Here he got, and I've never had anybody identify this, but he found something. I think it might be a mole or a vole, but he found something and he just went to town on it. So this was an interesting shot to capture. Not the prettiest, most glamorous shot, and probably not one you'd enter into a contest. But for hawk nerds and raptor freaks, a pretty cool shot. And then these are headshots that I actually got in flight. So close. One of the things that I like about these is, again, I'm using the car as a blind. If you're out photographing standing up in a field somewhere, odds are these birds are going to fly away. So even if they drop off a perch and you get a nice flight shot, they're going to be going away. You can see this bird is parallel to the camera or perpendicular to the camera, and I've got a really nice clean profile. So there's no distractions. He's not going away. It's not a tail shot, but still a head shot, which transitions us a little bit into the birds in flight. And then one more, this was a peregrine falcon. We were on the beach with this one, and he literally just, we were photographing him on the perch. He literally flew off the perch and buzzed my head. I was lucky enough to get something sharp out of this, and I chose to go with a really tight crop on his head. So a couple things about perch birds I just want to revisit. One is knowing the areas is really important. You can get a lot of great photos if you know the areas and the habitat and the habits of your subjects. Raptors, again, they have hunting areas and territories. So when they're not on migration and they're in either for the winter, they're overwintering, or they're in a breeding area, they will have large territories but pretty predictable, and they do like the same perches, and they'll use those perches over and over again. Didn't show any Cooper's hawks or perched sharpshins in this. If you've got feeders in your backyard, set up some perches. In addition to get some good songbirds, you may get some good Cooper's hawks, because Cooper's hawks, more so than sharpshins, they love to hunt at feeders. It's like a smorgasbord, and it's a great time to set up and potentially get some good raptor shots as well. One of the things I want to point out is, I told you earlier that raptor photography, I believe, is the hardest of all bird photography to do, and there's a couple reasons for that I'll explain as I go through tonight. But none of these shots are baited. So everything that I shoot is unbaited. I don't shoot a lot of owls for the simple fact that owls are very difficult to shoot if you don't use bait, and I don't. So all of these raptors are natural in the wild. None of them are captive. So this is not a captive bird. This is a wild bird. If you are baiting hawks, it is a pretty easy process. If you are baiting owls, the photography is not very challenging. It's basically just show up, throw out some mice, and set up your camera. Again, I like the challenge of photography, not just the result, but the process. And getting back to that 50 to 100 hours to find 17 pictures that I posted, if you don't love that process of bird watching, hawk watching, being out in the environment, if your only goal is the photograph, this is going to be really, really frustrating for you. And you may just want to go to Conowingo, and you may want to go up to New York and photograph peregrines because they're easier and much less frustrating. But if you enjoy the process, if you like to sit up on a mountain for 5 or 6 hours at a shot with some binoculars and a handful of people and talk and try to identify things flying past a ridge, it can actually be pretty rewarding. And that's going to transition us into some of these birds in flight. The first one here is very typical of what you see posted publicly. This is a belly shot, and this is a sharp-shinned hawk. This is very typical of what you would get on the flyovers, and it doesn't really matter where you are. Choosing the right location is imperative for birds in flight because perspective is going to be very important. This is the most common vantage point for any raptor. 90%, maybe even 99% of what you see is going to be flying over your head. So finding areas at elevation are going to be very helpful. I'm going to give you a couple tools at the end, hawk watches, and some websites that will get you in the right direction. But when you can get at elevation, you at least have a chance to get eye level or top side views, which is going to make your images stand out to the other 90%, which are going to be that are going to look like this. This isn't a bad image. I actually like it because it shows great detail. It's a juvenile bird with good streaking, and it's got a nice shape to it. So it's something that I would post, but it's not something I would ever expect somebody to come up to me and say, I'd like to buy that and hang it on my wall. Some of these other birds in flight, though, you will see that. You will see an opportunity to say, hey, this is something I would like on my wall. This northern harrier, again, solid blue background, not ideal for what I do. The next few are actually all going to be solid blue backgrounds. I don't have a rule against it, but it's a strong dislike. I really like to get something in the background, whether it's trees, horizon, or clouds. This was such a close look. This bird was probably 30 feet away, flew right past me. That the detail in the head and the eyes kind of outweighs the fact that there's not much going on in the background. This is a prairie falcon, same thing, typical. Even though it's eye level, perspective is good. I'm getting better with perspective here and with the harrier, but still nothing going on in the background. Again, nothing going on in the background. Great look, nice and close, nothing happening in the background. Now here's a blue background again, but at least now I've got some action. And for this one, I was setting up on the favorite perch that I anticipated him coming back to. So after he was out in the field, he jumped right back to his favorite perch, and I was able to get this. So what you don't see here, just off the frame, is a perch that he's going to be landing on. And then we'll go a couple more here. This is a ferruginous hawk. You could see a little bit of, I don't know if it'll come through, but a little bit of clouds in the background, some wispy stuff. Really not enough to make a difference. And if you are going to post these solid backgrounds, there are some shots that do work. So to me, this one works. This is a sharp-shinned hawk coming right at me at top speed. Very difficult. I've been trying to get this shot for a long time. This is the adult, which I don't get a lot of opportunities with, but you could just see the intense stare of this hawk coming in this case at an owl decoy. One of the things that hawk watches do employ, almost all the ones that I've been to, is they'll put up owl decoys, and those decoys will just draw some of the raptors in to investigate. Rarely do they actually attack it, but sometimes they'll even dive bomb it, try to scare it off the perch. They'll do that once or twice, and then they'll normally just go on their way. But in those moments, you have these incredible opportunities. When I talk about difficulty, to put it into perspective, this bird is now flying directly at me at a speed of probably somewhere between 40 and 80 miles an hour. And when you think about this, when I photographed this, my guess is he was 30, maybe 50 feet away. The amount of distance he's closing in seconds, he's closing 10 or 20 feet in a matter of seconds. So just the logistics of the camera, trying to keep up the autofocus to get this shot is incredibly difficult and requires, honestly, some degree of luck. So I've taken this shot 100 times, and in that 100 times, only a few frames ever come out sharp. And it really does have to do with the autofocus system. You could try to manually focus if you wanted. I don't know how anybody could manually focus on moving hawks like this, but again, it's something that you could certainly try if you wanted. Another blue sky. The reason I showed this is actually a specific reason for this. It's a rough-legged hawk taken locally a couple years ago. One of the things about this was actually taken quite a few hours after sunrise, in direct sun. You can see there's no clouds up there, so very strong light. It was taken in snow. Snow is an amazing reflector. So when you have snow on the ground, think about that as an opportunity. Even though you might not have a lot of backgrounds going on, it's going to reflect the light from underneath. So it's the same principle as when you go out on a photo shoot and you see somebody with a big reflector and there's a model on the beach reflecting light up. It's going to kill a lot of those harsh shadows and provide some light from underneath. So that snow works as a giant reflector. This was a good example of an image taken at a time when it was not ideal conditions. The lighting was much too harsh, but it still worked. And again, we have really good eye contact on this one. By the way, rough-legged hawks are amazing. If you ever have an opportunity, even just to go out and see some, we get them in the northeast part of the United States. There are areas in the Midwest I've been in Wisconsin. I think I might have one in here from Wisconsin. And Utah has a ton, Idaho, but in that part, they're very densely populated in the winter. They are migrants, so they only come down in the winter and then they go up to the Arctic to breed. This one was actually one of the Wyoming rough-legged hawks. And the one thing I want to start to introduce now is, if you notice the background, this does have just a few branches in the background. To me, anything in the background that can add interest helps, as long as it's not a distraction. So here's a sharp-shinned cutting over a tree. So these are the natural background. And it does show something to break up the blue. Not ideal, not great, but there is starting to become an element in the background. A red-tailed hawk. On this one, I don't know if you can see, but he's over me. And because he's banking, those are a lot of times the shots I choose. So even though the bird, I'm on the ground and he's overhead, because the bank is occurring, it does give the illusion that we're on the same perspective or on the same plane. You may not be able to see it, but you'll start to see clouds introduced here. And then in the next couple, I'll show you some better examples. This is a broadwing hawk from this year. And now you can see these wispy clouds in the background. To me, when I see these wispy and puffy clouds, I really get excited because I know I'm going to have some interest in the background. On an editing note, I will tell you, I accentuate the whites and the blues. So I darken the blues in post and I try to lighten the clouds to get more contrast in those clouds to bring them out a little bit. So this, if you looked at the raw file, these blues and whites are much closer in terms of luminance, but here I'm kind of exaggerating it to show the clouds. But that's a broad-winged hawk. That's an adult, really beautiful birds. For those of you thinking about migration, these birds come in huge numbers. So they'll drive through this area, and in a good day, we can get 1,000 to 5,000 birds coming through Pennsylvania, but the same is true of New Jersey. And then there's also a flyway in the middle part of the country that gets huge birds. As all of these raptors migrate, they'll end up going through Texas, down through Mexico, and there are hawk watches along the way. I saw one this year that had back-to-back days with 40,000 broad-winged hawks. These birds are known to be very social, so when they travel in huge groups. And they're beautiful birds, very tough to photograph though, because they use thermals and they do high migration, so they're typically over your head, which is why getting even a shot like this, which isn't totally eye level, was rewarding for me because it had good detail, and you could start to see the head a little bit better in the eye. A lot of times these are going to be overhead. When we talk about these birds in flight, the one thing I wanted to use an opportunity to talk about is when you're choosing locations, really consider not just quantities and numbers, but also perspective and the opportunity to get close. So a good example, that hawk watch I told you about that had back-to-back 40,000 broad-winged hawks. Those were down in Texas. And I asked somebody down there, I said, man, I'd love to come down there and shoot these hawks because 40,000, I mean, you got to hit one, right? And I said, where's the highest elevation there? And they said, there is no elevation. So everything is flat in that part of Texas. So to get these birds, 40,000 is amazing in a day, but they're all, 100% of them are going to be over your head. There's no way to photograph them at eye level. So you're going to get some neat experiences from that, but you're really probably not going to walk away with photos. So think about what you're doing. And again, this is obviously focused at the photography side. So the photos is what we're after. So think about where you can get at elevation. I have seen in one day hundreds of hawks, broadwings, below me at the hawk watches that I go to along the Kittatinny Ridge in Pennsylvania. Again, now we're introducing some clouds in the background here. Here's a merlin. Again, clouds in the background here, adding some interest. This is another merlin with some clouds in the background. Sharp-shinned hawk, again, clouds in the background. And then a peregrine. And I'm going to kind of switch a little bit from these clouded backgrounds to horizons. So this was just an introduction to the concept of adding a horizon or horizontal element to the photo. You'll see it a little bit better in some of these other ones as we go from these clouds to these horizons. One of the things that I think breaks up these images and it gives a sense of place to the subject is having a mountain or any horizon in the background. In my other type of photography, that could be for shorebirds, it could be the water level on the beach can provide a horizon. But for these, it's primarily mountains. So while I'll shoot birds anywhere, I typically wait till they get closer to the horizon and try to choose those images to post. Could be a personal preference, it might just be me, but I do think it adds a sense of place to the subject. It also breaks up a solid background. So let me just kind of run through these real quick. You'll see that ridge here along the background. Another one, this time it's the same mountain ridge, but you're seeing the greens of the trees. This is a peregrine falcon. Well, a caveat to this, and for a couple of these photos, when I have distance from my subject to the horizon, and this is just true confession, we call this truth in captioning, right? So when we post images online, we'd like to know, is that really what you saw? So while these backgrounds, I never will substitute a background that wasn't there or change the environment, but I will move or condense the area between the horizon and the subject. So this is probably one that I remember doing because these trees were way down here. So I brought the distance in between here and here down. Posting on social media, the frames are so small, especially on Instagram, that when you post the bird way up here and the trees way down here, it just doesn't work. The subjects become really small in frame. So again, just truth in captioning. This was probably a little bit higher, and I just squeezed out the middle and brought him down to the horizon so I could include everything into that frame. But again, I never substitute a background. I will never put snowflakes or butterflies on any of my animals or any of my birds. All right, I'm just going to take a quick break over there. Is there a way to submit photos? I never get these shots at a hawk watch. Again, it just goes back to time. You have to invest a ton of time at hawk watches to get good photos. And again, knowing the hawk watches that are going to provide you the best experience and the closest looks. One thing you'll notice, and this is a broadwing hawk that's up here now, again, the horizontal element in the background. But as I flip through these birds in flight, the majority of them are sharp-shinned hawks. These little accipiters are quite aggressive, especially the juveniles. So as they come by our hawk watch, if they see that owl decoy, they will come in to investigate it. They're very curious. Some birds, bald eagle, we see them at the hawk watches here, but very rarely do we get good close looks. Their primary concern is just gliding along that ridge, getting as much distance as they can in one day. They don't attack the owls. They don't have much concern for it. In fact, a lot of times you'll see other raptors attacking bald eagles, and they pretty much just brush them off. They're just trying to get through. Here's an image that I like because it had both that horizontal element, but it also included a little bit of foreground here. And I've got a couple that show, again, like these trees in the background. Here he's actually below the horizon of the trees. I love this image for that reason. Very difficult shot. Again, these birds are starting to get close, and it's a real task on the equipment to track and to keep up with. Beautiful rough-legged hawk here in Utah, and these are the mountains in the background. So again, taking advantage of the environment and placing in a sense of space. A northern harrier, not really an environment you would expect, but here with mountains in the background. Normally these are marsh birds, and I'll show you some examples now of kind of a typical environment. This is something I love. I love taking any subject, whether it's a raptor or a songbird, and putting them into the environment that we would typically see them in. And these are called marsh. They used to be called marsh hawks, but these northern harriers, this is their environment. So here he's just hunting over the hawk. This is nicknamed the gray ghost. This is the male. The ratio of male to female, I can't give you an exact number. I'm guessing it's 5 or 10 to 1 from what I photograph. So when you see the gray or the male, it's pretty exciting. This is kind of like one of those birds that the raptor photographers would really covet. So you have a few images. These are two different birds, but this is the second bird, again, over the marsh, hunting in a sense of place. Horizon in the background, and again, now he's breaking the horizon, which I actually like that because it shows a sense of realism on there. And then here's a different, this is the female, northern harrier, was able to get these kind of dead weeds and grasses below, but a real good sense of environment, and another harrier. And then in snow. And this is, again, adding a horizontal element with some snowflakes. And then this is the same bird going down for some prey. Now, while I told you earlier it's tough to get golden hour images, I've managed a few in my life, birds in flight during golden hour. Very difficult to do. I have a couple at the end I'll show you. This is a sharp-shinned hawk. I went looser on the composition here because the colors were so beautiful on these two, especially this one. This is fog in the middle. So this is a green valley below. This is a top side view, so I'm actually above the hawk. Fog in the middle, and then this gorgeous light that was just hitting and lighting up the sky. It's a beautiful scene, and you could see that this is a much looser composition than most of the other ones that I did. But again, when you have this much color and the scene feels so nice, I think it's the right way to go. Get a couple more here. Bald eagles, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on bald eagles. I have some examples of that horizontal or that horizon in the background. Somebody asked me today why I don't like bald eagles. It's not that I don't like them. They're beautiful subjects, but in this area, there's one location where everybody goes, and at Conowingo in Maryland, there's quite literally hundreds, sometimes thousands of people there. And when you think about how many images are coming out of that, hundreds, thousands of people, hundreds or thousands of images per person, tens of thousands of images per day coming out of one location, you're going to see a lot of repetition. You're going to see the same fishing shots over and over again. And so it becomes a little, I don't want to say boring, because it's still nice when it's yours and it's personal. And certainly the first couple times you go there, you're going to be excited about the pictures that you get. I would encourage everybody to go there and shoot eagles at some point in their life. But to do it regularly, after a while, it just gets a little old. And again, to do something different or unique becomes really challenging. So I only make 1 or 2 trips a year there at the most, normally just one trip, and we made that one this year already. But again, the concept here is just trying to introduce things onto the horizons. And I love it when I can place the birds close to that. So I typically choose my frames based off of the amount of horizon that I can include in that image. And you can see all of these have elements of trees. This one has a beautiful black storm cloud behind it, and then some trees down here as well. And then we move kind of into these solid backgrounds, which is, I really like these. So moving from the blue skies to the clouds, talked about introducing some horizons, and now how to get solid backgrounds. For this perspective is critical, because you're normally going to have to be at least at eye level. You're going to have something in the background like a mountain. In this case, there's a hill, a tall hill of trees behind the dam that used as a backdrop for that. Here's a harrier with a nice solid background in the marsh grasses against a tree line in golden hour. That's the female harrier. And then these harriers, knowing your species, and I can't go through every species and tell you about them, but each has a certain behavior. If you're learning, I talked about the eagles at Conowingo, pretty easy place to shoot for a beginner. The 2 easiest raptors to photograph, and people are going to argue like, oh, northern harriers aren't easy. When you're shooting a sharp-shinned hawk or a merlin that's flying at 50 to maybe up to 100 miles an hour against a harrier who's cruising over the grasslands probably at 20 miles an hour and is a much bigger bird, these are much easier to photograph. But again, the sense of environment here with a solid background, but it really places them in the scene, and it really creates an overall image that's pleasing. The one thing that, again, if you look at areas where you could find harriers, there's no Conowingo for harriers, so you're not going to go somewhere and find 100 harriers in one area, but grasslands, so large swaths of grass or marshlands. So if you're down in the Delaware Bay areas, along the New Jersey shore, in some of those marshy areas, or there's some areas that are just huge grasslands. Up in New York, there's a pretty popular one, but they're all over. If you find those fields, you're going to find harriers, and it's just a matter of time before you'll get images like this. So these birds fly low, which is going to put you at the perspective without needing elevation, and you just got to be patient enough to try to get the shots. So here's a couple more of these harriers working on backgrounds. I'm just going to hit the questions real quick. Do you use hides, camos, or vehicles to get close in order to photograph raptors? So yes and no. If I'm talking about the hawk watches, no. So all of these sharp-shinned hawks, the falcons, those are all pretty much just standing up on a pile of rocks and waiting for them to come by. The red tails, and sometimes with harriers, Areas where I'm going to be out with harriers in fields. Sometimes I'll throw a camo blind over myself and the tripod. For the red-tail hawk, I will typically use my car as a blind. And I would say a lot of those perched birds that we saw earlier, probably every one of those perched birds was taken from my car. So the car is a very effective tool. But again, you've got to be careful because when you drive up and stop, sometimes they'll fly. There's a balancing act between can you stop without flushing the bird? And if you can, and you can stay there long enough, it's probably going to become very natural again and start acting naturally. So preening or feeding or doing whatever it was doing, but in a very natural, relaxed state. If you scare it off, it's not going to fly at you. It's always going to fly away. So you're never going to get this incredible shot of a bird flying at you. What you're going to get is its tail going the other direction. I can tell you I photographed a lot of birds, a lot of hawks, and I've never had one where I've flushed it off its perch and had it fly over my head and create a nice picture. It's always going to go the other way. So great question. Thank you. A couple more solid backgrounds. Again, these are topside looks from the hawk watches, all with solid backgrounds and all where I'm a little bit above the bird. And there's a pretty fall background from a couple years ago. Just getting back, these I introduced just about that topic of perspective. So when the eagles fish, trying to get eye level with them to me is a little bit more appealing. One of the things I don't like about Conowingo are these rock backgrounds. They're pretty much unavoidable. You can try to blur them out by a smaller aperture and hoping that they come closer so that those rocks get blurred out. But it's kind of just a reality down there. But you can get some cool fishing shots. So action shots, if you're worried about the backgrounds become less relevant and the action becomes more important. So in these types of shots, really it's about the action, not so much about the backgrounds and being pretty. So I'm gonna ask you guys if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in now. I have a couple more things that I wanted to talk about, but I'm gonna show you a couple of my favorite images. I did include one eagle. So again, eagle's not my favorite subject, but I really did like this one just because it feels so dramatic. And this occurred in an area where we had direct light behind us. We had storm clouds on the other side. I was with Mark. Ray was there with us. And we saw it it was interesting because we saw it kind of shaping up for interest. And we had a group of photographers, probably 100 of them to our right. And as we saw the birds coming down, I think there were two of them starting to loop around and drop in, even though they were farther away, we started to take pictures. And Ray and I got this. I think Mark might have got the similar shots. Everyone else on the other side ignored it because they considered it probably too far away. It's not going to be a good picture. It's just another bird flying in the air from a distance. They were waiting for that, crazy action shot. So it's probably one of my favorite eagle shots. And it wasn't something that everybody else was looking at. So again, the dramatic light, and this really isn't about light, but using that dramatic light and that dark background with direct light was really effective for this. So this was actually one of my favorite shots. Saw a couple questions come in. For bird in flight, hand holding or gimbal. So there's two different techniques. So for anything that is going to be that I'm going to be in one area for a long time and that's slower moving. So that would be eagles, harriers. Those would probably be the two that I would use. Oh, and I didn't do owls at all in this, by the way. So short-eared owls is another one that you can get. They hunt dusk and dawn. So you can get them during daylight hours hunting. I would use a tripod possibly for short-eared owls, eagles, and harriers. All of the accipiters and falcons, which move much, much, much faster and often fly directly over your head, I don't use the tripod for. I handhold, I wear a sling so I can have binoculars to hawk watch. Because again, I'm an avid hawk watcher. I'll sit up there for 5 hours and not take a picture and still have a good day. So a sling on one side with the camera, binoculars on the other side, and then everything becomes handheld for those birds. And most of the other hawks in general. For the car shots, so when I'm in the car, I'm generally just propping it on the window. Nothing fancy. There's no support that's there. I will tell you, I think gimbals are really, really mechanically, they're very nice. They can be very beautiful sometimes, the way they're crafted and designed. I think they're the most overvalued piece of equipment in the camera bag. I mean, I spent a couple $100s on my gimbal. I like it, but functionally, there's not. I mean, one might be a little smoother than another, but neither one is going to produce a better picture. If I had to tell people where to invest their dollars, it would always be into the lens. Take that $700 or $400, whatever you could do, try to get a better lens, than worrying about getting the best gimbal or the most expensive gimbal out there. But they are helpful when you set up on a tripod, super smooth, easy to use, and they do track very well. But for the faster moving birds, you're not going to have a lot of luck. And again, some of these my hawk watches are short hikes, but up hills, up rocks, a lot of slippery rocks. So I don't take my tripod ever up to shoot at the hawk watches that I go to. Method for using car as a blind. I will sometimes try to drive up. Harrier will typically swerve off before I can get to the car and leave. Yes. So the problem with approaching a bird with in any way is that it's gonna veer off course. Let me show you. I'll give you an example. This one's kind of funny. So I'm gonna go back to this bird, and let me actually go back one more. So this bird was, where is he? I think I had him up here in the blue skies. All right, this bird right here and this bird. This is, by the way, almost uncropped. That's how close he was. So for this, I saw observing behavior is critical in all wildlife photography, and with birds, it's no exception. So I saw how he was hunting. He was hunting in a straight line parallel to the road. But if I had tried to stay with him, I would keep pushing him away. So I tried what you're saying. I pulled over. He swerved kind of around and made a loop. And then I saw him coming back the other way. But then I realized how he was hunting. So what I did is I sped my car up, and I went about probably 500 or 600 feet in front of him, threw the car in park, ran out, jumped into the marsh grass, and just waited as I was in the grass. So I kind of beat him to the spot. That approach works for a lot of different, it works for waterfowl, for example. If you know where waterfowl are headed, you can sometimes get there before they see you and scare off. So that's what I did for that. So in general, if I'm shooting from the car, I'm going to try to anticipate where they are or find areas that are public and that they might be used to cars. Josh, I think he was on the I saw him in the chat window. He talks about a spot that he has where we're all jealous of because it's ducks that are in a park. Great ducks. I mean, they're beautiful and great light, but they're used to people. People are walking by them all day, so they don't get scared off. So the same is true of some raptors. The one red tail that I showed in here, I probably showed 3 or 4 different pictures of the same red tail hawk, and I've got one coming up at the end that I'm going to show you. He sits on a power line and has literally thousands of cars drive by him all day. He's not intimidated by a car at all. I can pull my car, reach out the sunroof, and get a shot of him anytime I want. So knowing that particular bird is kind of conditioned to automobiles is helpful. If you're in a completely wild environment, it's probably going to be a little bit more challenging. This one, to incorporate kind of a bunch of different concepts, this picture is one of my favorite. It has every component that I look for. Technically, if you were to nitpick this at 100%, you would say the wings, there's a little motion blur there. It probably could be a little bit sharper. I am so much more focused on the scene than making a technically perfect. If this was a technically perfect sharp bird throughout, wingtip to wingtip, on a blue background, I would hate this picture. But there's mist on the horizon below. That gives me that horizontal element that I personally love. I've got color in the background that's solid and not really broken up. There's different colors, but it's not a choppy background. And I've also got light. So again, the 3 things that I look for: light, perspective. I'm eye level with this. I've got great golden hour light. It was the first light of the day. And then environment. And I've got all 3 of those elements on a picture that's not a portrait, and those are my rules for portrait photography. But here I've got a bird in flight, so it's an action photo, and I've got all 3 of those elements really nailed. I'm going to run through a couple more of my favorites. I just talked about, I actually have a name. This guy's name is Herman. He's the one that's conditioned to automobiles, and I know where he hunts. So if I see him on a pole and he's facing a certain way, I can actually go to that area and hopefully get a shot like this. Last year was the first year I worked with him. I'd seen him there before in other years, but as I noticed, I kind of determined where he really liked to hunt. Red tails will hunt the same area over and over again. So in this field, if I see him on certain perches, this year I actually will use a blind and set up in the snow again and see if I can get this same shot. Now I think I might have been standing or kneeling for this, but I think if I was a little bit lower, it probably could have been even a little bit more interesting. But a pretty cool picture to be able to get it and anticipate it. And this shot was all about knowing the behavior and anticipating it. This wasn't just dumb luck. Dumb luck has happened. I've got another one up here of dumb luck soon that I'll show you. Here's one again that I just really love because it's that top side view, which to me is much more interesting than underneath. Solid background. This is one of those eyes on, sharp-shinned hawks coming right at me. Very difficult shot to get. I was really happy with this. But again, the inclusion of another element here, kind of a horizon. And this isn't a blue sky, this is a mountain background that I really liked. And then we talked about the challenges of golden hour and getting raptors at golden hour. This was one of those rare times where I got a flight shot very close at golden hour. This was at sunset, not sunrise. And again, if as a tip, sunset probably better for raptors if you're looking for light. He was on a perch, seemed to be pretty content. Not a lot of automobiles, but a few automobiles going by. So I just pulled the car over and waited him out. I literally just sat and waited and waited. I got a couple pictures of him on the pole. It was a man-made perch, so not something I was thrilled with, but I just literally sat there and waited for him to fly. And when he did, I got this one picture with his arms spread up and the legs down. That was just a couple frames after he had left the perch, so he hadn't even pulled his legs up. But the light on this one is really the highlight for me of that image. Not, again, very challenging, not an easy shot. I'm really proud of that one. A lot of people might look at it and say, well, it's okay. But for me, I just know how difficult it is to get that type of shot. This is the dumb luck shot. This was my first, I would say like my first wow moment as a wildlife photographer, taken way back with I think a 150 to 500 Sigma lens. I did just happen upon it. It was a bird that flew over my hood. I pulled the car over in midair. This sharp-shinned hawk grabbed a robin in midair. I titled this Mercy just because you could tell the bird looks like he's begging for his life. It was still breathing here. It did, he did die pretty much right in front of me, and then the hawk moved. One thing about hawks, especially these little accipiters, they're not going to leave prey. They may not eat again for a day or two, so when they have an opportunity for a meal, they're not going to leave it. So one thing to kind of be cautious about, if you see a raptor on prey already, so in other words, he's on the side of the road with a rabbit, probably not a good idea. It could make some cool pictures, but just approach with caution. Stay in your car, shoot from the window. Maybe you'll get lucky and you'll be able to get those shots. But if it's the only meal it's going to have and you're going to flush it from that meal, it's probably not a cool thing to do. So just something to keep in mind. And then this is actually the last image that I have for today. This is my favorite image I've ever taken of a raptor. One, because the species. I love rough-legged hawks. They have huge variation in plumage. What I will tell you, again, full disclosure, this is the natural environment. Everything there is real. I didn't add anything to it. I did, however, take away a small sign that was in front of him. He was on the sign. He left the sign. I waited at the sign for him to return. And this is him coming back. So at the bottom of this frame, like right around here, there was a sign. And I just removed that because it was, this bird is too damn sexy to have some man-made sign in it. So again, full disclosure, but that's one of my favorite images yet. So that's really what I had. I don't know if anybody has any more questions. I can talk a little bit. We have a couple minutes left, so I can talk about some of the more technical things. Camera equipment I think is pretty standard. You're going to want long lenses for this. You can do it with 300, but 500 or above is probably where you're going to want to be. Even on a crop sensor, you'll probably need 500. If you're shooting full frame, for most raptors, you're going to need 600. Again, they don't let you get close. Keep in mind, these birds can sometimes hear things that we can't. They can see things literally miles away. I've seen these sharp-shinned hawks probably a mile out see that owl and turn and bank hard and come right at it. Not something a human eye can achieve. So they're very perceptive. Their whole existence revolves around their ability to hunt, which means they have to be incredible. They have to have incredible eyesight, or in some cases, especially with owls, incredible hearing. Northern harriers have that facial disc, they call it, that kind of round structure in their face that helps with sound. But they're very alert. So again, sneaking up on them, kind of like ducks, very, very difficult to do. Before I leave, I didn't see any questions come in. I want to throw out a couple things. This is Humana, it's called. It's the Hawk Migration Association of North America, a great resource for hawk watching. One of the things that I look at in our area, we have a spring and fall migration that occurs. So when it's migration season, I will look at this almost every day. This is Hawk Mountain, and this is just the data of what they see monthly, daily, and there's even some charts in here, like bar charts, so you can see what's moving in at certain times of the year. So for example, this is Hawk Mountain, it's right near me. You could see these red-tailed hawks, and you can see the numbers of each species by day, and I could go back to September and see the whole month. When you start to look at that, you'll also start to notice that wind is very important to these migrations. So at some point, you've got to figure out which wind conditions work and all that. Again, you want to maximize your time up there. You don't want to go up there and see 3 birds. There are, like, again, broadwing hawks, we could see 1,000 in a day. Sharp-shinned hawks, I can see 300 in a day. So those are the times where you're going to get photographs just because you have more opportunities. The last thing I want to do, there's a couple books out there and a guy that I want to mention. This is a guy I got to know a couple years ago. I bought his book. One day I was chatting with somebody online, and when he said his name, I looked down at the book on my desk and I realized that it was Jerry Ligori, was the author of the book that was literally sitting on my desk, and I was chatting with him on Facebook. This is a book called Hawks at a Distance, but Jerry is probably the nation's leading expert on raptors and hawks. If you're interested in it, Google him. He's got a bunch of books out. He's not active right now in terms of social media and things, but he's had an incredible, just the knowledge that he has is just unbelievable. I belong to a group on Facebook called Raptor ID. It's a great resource if you're kind of into the raptors and you just want to learn about them. It's not going to deal with photography at all. But again, the more you learn about your subjects, as with anything, I think the better your photography is going to be. So I don't see any more questions. Looks like we're right at an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and log off and say good night. Thanks everybody for joining in. I do anticipate Ray next time. I'm hoping in December. If not, it was really tough to do this alone. I was trying to watch a couple things and not lose concentration. So I appreciate your patience with me as I got through this alone. It is much easier with 2 people, and if Ray's not available, I'm going to be sure to recruit somebody just to give me a break. But I really do appreciate it. If you have any questions, all of my stuff is S-Keys Images. So on Instagram, Facebook, S-Keys Images, and Flickr and 500 pixels. So just S-Keys Images, and I like to talk to people. So if you have questions, feel free to shoot me a message, and I'll get back to you. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and have a good night.